Colonial America was a society built on stark class divisions and systemic economic exploitation. For many, the American colonies offered the promise of a new start, but for the majority of laborers, the reality was a life of servitude and struggle. Central to this system was the institution of indentured servitude, which bound European immigrants to years of hard labor in exchange for passage to the New World. The contracts they signed were often heavily skewed in favor of landowners, leaving these laborers vulnerable to exploitation. The conditions were harsh, with long hours of grueling work, little legal recourse, and a high likelihood of illness or death before completing their term of service. Before we go on, please subscribe to our channel to explore the pivotal milestones in human evolution and the development of global societies. Do not forget, subscribe to the knowledge. This class of indentured servants became the backbone of colonial agriculture, particularly in tobacco-rich Virginia. Yet, as these servants gained their freedom, a new issue emerged: the demand for land. Freed laborers found themselves pushed to the fringes of society, often forced into conflict with Native American tribes as they tried to secure land for themselves. This created a volatile situation where former servants resented both the colonial elite who monopolized the best land and the native populations who occupied the territories they sought to claim. As the number of freed servants grew, the ruling elite faced increasing pressure from this disgruntled underclass. The wealthy plantation owners and colonial leaders, fearing unrest, sought to shift their labor system away from reliance on indentured servitude. By the early 18th century, they had largely transitioned to the use of enslaved Africans. Unlike indentured servants, enslaved individuals were bound for life, providing a more permanent and controlled labor force. This shift not only solidified the economic hierarchy, but also introduced a racial dimension that would deeply entrench social divisions. To prevent any potential alliances between poor whites and enslaved blacks, colonial legislatures enacted laws that institutionalized racial segregation. These slave codes granted privileges to poor whites, small plots of land, voting rights, or lower taxes, while simultaneously stripping black workers of all legal protections. The ruling class's strategy was clear: divide the lower classes along racial lines to maintain their own dominance. These deliberate policies forged a society where economic exploitation was not only widespread but also strategically embedded in both law and culture. The colonial elite's manipulation of class and race ensured the continuation of their control, creating a legacy of inequality that would endure well beyond the colonial period. The interplay of land, labor, and law in this era revealed the calculated measures taken to sustain a deeply hierarchical and exploitative society. Class fear played a central role in shaping the social and political strategies of colonial elites in America. The ruling class, composed of wealthy landowners and political leaders, was acutely aware of the volatile mix of economic discontent and social disparity brewing beneath them. Indentured servants, free laborers, enslaved Africans, and marginalized native groups all represented potential sources of resistance, either individually or, more alarmingly, together. The elites understood that any alliance between these groups could challenge their dominance. The fear of rebellion was not unfounded. Events like Bacon's Rebellion in 1676 had demonstrated the capacity of the lower classes to mobilize across racial and class lines when their grievances aligned. For a brief moment, impoverished whites, indentured servants, and enslaved Africans united to challenge the authority of Governor William Berkeley and the wealthy planter class. Though the rebellion was ultimately crushed, it sent shockwaves through the colonial leadership, exposing the fragility of their power structure. In response, the elite worked systematically to prevent similar uprisings. Colonial governments implemented legal and social mechanisms to divide the lower classes. Racially discriminatory laws, such as Virginia's slave codes, created a hierarchy that favored poor whites while stripping black individuals of their rights and autonomy. By granting small but significant privileges to white laborers, land grants, voting rights, or reduced taxes, the ruling class fostered loyalty among them and sowed division between white and black laborers. The strategy extended beyond race. Economic policies were designed to keep the lower classes fragmented and dependent. High taxes and land monopolization ensured that small farmers and freedmen remained tied to the plantation economy, either as tenants or low-wage laborers. The elites manipulated access to resources to control the ambitions of the lower classes, limiting their ability to organize or challenge authority. Class fear also shaped the rhetoric and policies of colonial leaders. The Virginia House of Burgesses, for example, expressed concern that European immigrants, particularly those from politically volatile regions like Ireland, could bring revolutionary ideas to the colonies. Laws were passed to regulate the movements and behaviors of laborers, particularly indentured servants, who were seen as potential instigators of unrest. This paranoia about outsiders becoming catalysts for rebellion further underscored the fragile confidence of the colonial elite. Ultimately, class fear was more than a reaction to specific events. It was a guiding principle of colonial governance. The deliberate cultivation of racial and class divisions served as a preemptive strike against unity among the lower classes, ensuring that rebellion was less likely to occur, and, if it did, less likely to succeed. These strategies not only secured the power of the colonial elite, but also embedded systemic inequalities that would shape the trajectory of American society for generations. Historians have long debated the deeper implications of the events surrounding Bacon's rebellion and the broader context of colonial America's class struggles. Howard Zinn's interpretation, for instance, challenges traditional narratives that frame social hierarchies as natural or inevitable. Instead, Zinn emphasizes the deliberate construction of these hierarchies by the ruling elite, designed to perpetuate their dominance over an inherently unstable and stratified society. The rebellion itself serves as a critical lens for understanding the interplay between class and race in early America. Zinn argues that the fleeting solidarity between poor whites and enslaved blacks during the uprising posed an existential threat to the colonial elite. This moment of unity highlighted the potential for collective action against a system that exploited both groups. However, the elite's swift and calculated response, through violence and systemic division, underscored their awareness of this threat. They not only suppressed the rebellion, but also worked to ensure that such alliances would not recur. Zinn's analysis situates Bacon's rebellion within a broader critique of colonial power structures. He contends that the division of labor along racial lines was not an organic development but a tactical decision. By institutionalizing racial hierarchies, the elite could grant limited privileges to poor whites, fostering a sense of superiority over black laborers while deflecting attention away from the economic disparities they all endured. This strategy of divide and rule cemented a social order that protected the wealth and power of a minority at the expense of the majority. Furthermore, Zinn challenges the romanticized narratives of colonial America as a land of opportunity and equality. He presents the colonial period as a time of deliberate oppression, where the promise of freedom and prosperity was systematically denied to those at the bottom of the social hierarchy. This perspective invites a re-examination of how early American society was shaped not by the ideals of liberty, but by the practical demands of maintaining control over a divided and exploited labor force. The implications of Zinn's interpretation extend beyond the colonial period. By illustrating how race and class were manipulated to serve the interests of the elite, he provides a framework for understanding the persistence of systemic inequality in America. The legal, cultural, and economic structures established in response to events like Bacon's rebellion did not simply fade away. They evolved, laying the foundation for the racial and economic disparities that continue to shape the nation. Through this lens, the rebellion becomes more than a historical episode. It is a case study in the mechanisms of power and the enduring strategies of division that define much of American history. We'd love to hear your thoughts on possible future topics. Leave your suggestions in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. As always, our references and further reading are listed in the description below if you'd like to dive deeper into the subject. Thanks for watching, and do not forget, subscribe to The Knowledge.